Now let's take a look at how to take some of your digital photographs and correct the perspective that is often a problem when you're shooting up on tall buildings and things like that. This is a problem that's really unavoidable with digital cameras simply because of the optic limitations of your digital camera lenses and so forth. So when you bring these items into Photoshop, you'll notice that a lot of these tall buildings that you photograph usually slant inward like so. You'll see all these lead-in lines that actually go in a diagonal towards the top as opposed to being straight up and down as they should be when you're viewing the actual building. So there's two actual ways that you can correct perspective here inside of Photoshop. So let's go ahead and I'll show you the quick and easy way first, and then I'll show you a more precise way second. So let's go ahead now. I'm going to duplicate this layer by using Command or Control J on my keyboard. And once I do that, I'm going to bring up Free Transform by using Command or Control T on my keyboard as well. That's just going to bring up my free transform handles. And now what I can do is control click on the Mac or right click on the PC. I'm going to bring up these free transform options. And I can come down here and I can choose perspective. Now once I do that, I have the ability then to just drag out these corner handles like so until I straighten out that building. Now when I do that, I can go ahead and hit enter or return to commit to those changes, and now I have effectively corrected the perspective of the sides of this building. However, that's not even the most precise way to do this, simply because of the fact that you have to line it up mainly with the edges here of the document itself. There's no grid lines or anything that's going to help you to straighten up these columns so that everything is exactly straight. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to undo those changes and get it back to my original image. And now I'm going to show you how to use one of Photoshop's filters to better correct your perspective. Now we're going to come up here to the filter menu. We're going to choose Distort, and we're going to come down to Lens Correction. In the lens correction dialog box, you'll notice by default you get this grid pattern over your image. And normally this is something that we really don't like to have over our image simply because it distracts from a lot of the things that we're going to be doing here in the lens correction dialog box. However, it's pretty helpful for this particular image because we can use these straight up and down grid lines to better correct our perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to up the size of the grid just a little bit here, maybe to about 25, just to get me a little bit bigger grid pattern there. I'm also going to change the color of the grid to a nice lighter blue color like this, just so I have a little bit better understanding of exactly where those grid lines are. Now what we can do is we can come down here into the transform section of the lens correction dialog box, and we can control the vertical perspective simply by making this slider go back and forth. So what I need to do now is I need to drag this slider to the left, and when I'm doing that, I'm actually correcting the perspective of the building by dragging in that slider like so. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to line these columns up onto these grid lines like so. So when I drag that in, I'm trying to line up mainly like these lines right here onto these grid lines. So try to get this line in line as much with that grid as you can. Now you're going to be seeing some transparency issues down here and on the sides, but we're going to fix that in just a moment. So I'm going to keep drawing this over to the left until I have those lines pretty much lined up the way I need them to be, like so. So we've corrected the perspective here of the building, but what we need to do now is we need to fix all of this transparent area that we have. Down here at the bottom, you have what's called this little slider called scaling percentage, and what you can do then is just take this and start to increase the size of the photograph. Now, this is not going to work with low resolution files as much as it would work with a higher resolution file, simply because of the fact that scaling low resolution files is going to cause severe pixelation and jagged edges and lots of artifacts and things like that. So you don't want to do this with a low resolution file. This happens to be an 8 megapixel file from a digital camera, so there's really no problem with just scaling it up a little bit. So once you're finished with that, you can go ahead now and you can click OK. And when that brings it back in here, you've effectively corrected the perspective, made all of those lines go straight up and down, so it's just as if you were viewing the building from the bottom up as you took the photograph. So here's a quick before and after of how we've straightened out that perspective and really made the photograph look as realistic as possible.